this was a man who, with his allies, tried to overturn the 2020 election, the subject of in fact, two forthcoming criminal cases. He encouraged people to go into the Capitol to block that process of confirming Joe Biden as president. And they raided that Capitol. Now, yes, Trump was unsuccessful and had to leave the White House. But what has happened since then is that Trump and those supporters have continued to put out a stream of falsehoods, including repeating again and again the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. And the media have given that oxygen. In an election where you have important issues like the economy, immigration, LGBT rights, women's rights, including abortion, foreign policy, be it Russia's invasion of Ukraine or Gaza, climate change. The media failing to address those issues and then failing to do their due diligence by letting Trump dominate the core of what is happening. It's the greatest threat to American democracy since 1865 in the U.S. Civil War.
Donald Trump has been speaking today. Of course, you'll have seen him or heard him. He said he's honoured to have been convicted by a criminal court. He's called America a fascist state. It's on several of our front pages tomorrow morning. He gave that defiant speech earlier today in Trump Tower. Joe Biden, the current president, has since called those comments reckless. But what could this conviction mean for Trump's campaign? How secure is the American Constitution after this decision? Let's speak to Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at University College Dublin's Clinton Institute. Prof, good to talk to you again. How are you?
Great, because I get to chat with you, Henry.
Okay. Now, are you looking at what's happening in your home country with what? With shock, with awe, with dismay? Or do you think, this is good, this was a trial, it was fair, the court systems worked, and even if Trump rants and rails and makes money, well, we are a nation of laws, and that's been shown. What's your view?
Well, Henry, I start off with the fundamental as an analyst, but also as a native of the States, that the legal system did its job, that despite the sustained attacks, the attacks on the judge's family, on the jury, on witnesses, on the prosecutors, on the district attorney, despite all the insults and the pressure, at the end of the day, 12 peers of Donald Trump, having heard the evidence from both sides, with the defense as well as the prosecution being able to make their case, decided that the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt showed that Donald John Trump had authorized payoffs to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star with whom he had a sexual encounter a decade earlier, that he covered up those payoffs by lying about them on business records. And all of that was interference in the 2016 election. They decided that.
But you heard him today. He said this was an old case. Previous district attorneys, including Bragg himself, Alvin Bragg, had dismissed it. It was considered to be weak. It didn't merit a second glance. But then it became political. And then when they realized he was going to run again, they brought it back. And that's why it's so unfair. And a lot of Americans agree with him. That's why Trump is on the front page of the FT, of the Times, of the Mail and the Telegraph, saying this is the behavior of a fascist state. And many Americans will say, you go, Donald, we believe you.
You know what the greatest service that a responsible media could do for us, whether we're in the U.S., the U.K., Ireland, or elsewhere? And that is stop quoting Donald Trump when he spews insults and falsehoods, when he makes statements with no regard to the facts. And I know you're doing your job asking this question, but what you've just done is you've just amplified a falsehood by Donald Trump. Alvin Bragg did not throw this case prosecution out against Trump and then suddenly say, I've got to revive it because of politics. The facts of the case is that this case was begun under Bragg's predecessor as the Manhattan District Attorney, Cyrus Vance, that a number of the team worked on it, collected evidence, that when Bragg came in as district attorney, they went back and reviewed the evidence to assess whether or not it was strong enough to bring Trump to trial. That's what they're supposed to do. That's their job. And you know what their judgment call was? Yeah, that evidence was strong enough. And you know what happened in the trial? The jury agreed with them.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what the media could do? They could actually report that line of argument and not quote Trump's words and not say that millions of people support that, because we don't know if millions of people support that. What happens is that the media says millions of people support it. They let Trump take control of the narrative, and clearly that gives him an advantage to do two things. One is to escape accountability, even as we await the sentencing on July 11th, and then two, to give him an advantage, a leg up in November's election against Joe Biden.
I suppose the reason why my colleagues do say that millions agree with him is when they look at the polls and the base of Trump support, about 35 or so percent, and then you see how he's polling in some of the swing states, they extrapolate from that. And I understand why you think that is wrong to do it. And you're an academic and you want to stress test these arguments, but our job is slightly different from yours. We've got to report the facts, but we have to try and channel the public mood as well. Now, Professor, let me think about this. The last time Donald Trump vented his spleen in a way that was considered truly dangerous for the US, for the Constitution, of course, on January the 6th, 2021. Afterwards, a number of people said, well, the guardrails held. The separation of powers worked. The Constitution was robust enough. The vice president did his job and the election result was certified. How concerned are you that if it's close, come November, the system may be stressed and it may not work, it may not hold this time?
I mean, the system held up in January 2021, but it was a damn close thing.
Yeah.
Because this was a man who, with his allies, tried to overturn the 2020 election, the subject of two forthcoming criminal cases. He encouraged people to go into the Capitol, to block that process of confirming Joe Biden as president. And they raided that Capitol. Now, yes, Trump was unsuccessful and had to leave the White House. But what has happened since then is that Trump and those supporters have continued to put out a stream of falsehoods, including repeating again and again the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. And the media have given that oxygen. In an election where you have important issues like the economy, immigration, LGBT rights, women's rights, including abortion, foreign policy, be it Russia's invasion of Ukraine or Gaza, climate change, the media failing to address those issues and then failing to do their due diligence by letting Trump dominate the core of what is happening. It's the greatest threat to American democracy since 1865 in the U.S. Civil War.
In that case, Scott, how should the administration, how should the levers of power, the FBI, the CIA, and others, the National Guard in various states, prepare for what may happen? You know, whether it's election interference, whether it's militias, or possible threats unknown.
Well, they're preparing as they did this week, which is that they, put out security outside that Manhattan courthouse, quite rightly, but also reporting the facts. We need to keep our heads about us. There are about 100 people that were there on day one of Trump's trial. That number dwindled to about 10. It grew a little bit in the last few days as the jury verdict was expected. And let's be clear, those people, most of them Trump supporters, they were peaceful. So we didn't get the civil war that Donald Trump has warned would happen. And I don't think we get the civil war that Trump thinks happens this time around if everybody does their job responsibly.
Yeah.
That includes the security services and the media. And you know what I'm going to repeat to you, Henry? Stop extrapolating. The media shouldn't extrapolate. That's not what we do as journalists or as analysts. We report what is there, not what we think might be there. In other words, if we all do our damn job, then perhaps American democracy, the American system, will be served. And even though it has been bent, and there's a man intent on breaking it, perhaps it will still hold in 2024 and 2025.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at University College Dublin's Clinton Institute.